This is going to be a relatively quick live stream because I have a special guest that is probably not going to tolerate spending a lot of time here. So we're going to just give that a shot and see what happens. I will begin very shortly. I just want to make some adjustments here. Anybody who's catching this on the replay who's not subscribed, I would humbly request that you consider subscribing. Anybody who's watching this live right now, well, if you're not subscribed, I would also recommend subscribing because, you know, it's never a bad thing to have more subscribers. Or it can be, but it's not. Wish I drank some water right before this. But anyway, at least we have the chat pop up. Squirtle, honey, watch out. Ooh, don't get stuck. Alrighty, here we go. This is my friend Squirtle. She's a female red-eared slider. At least I believe she's female because of various factors that we'll get into in a moment. But some people have seen pictures of her, looked at her nose, and said the way her nose swoops up and gets pointy makes it look like she's a you know, a male turtle. But as far as I'm aware, Squirtle is a female, and you can see as we tour her face, you can see what her face looks like. And you'll notice that as we look at her shell, there's like these white deposits. And so these are just basically almost like dirt, dust, maybe dried up algae. But basically whatever's in the water, when she climbed out, any surface scuzz that was on the surface of the water remained on her shell. She dried up and it looks like white stuff now. But if you rinse her off in the sink or pour tap water on her, most of it will come right off. Although sometimes they'll get like something that looks like this, like hard water deposits, and those are pretty normal. I don't have hard water, so that could just be more dirt. But you know, it does happen in nature or in a situation where your tap water comes from a ground source. Now, I want to direct your attention to her beak, and see that bite pattern there on the top half of her beak. I believe she's biting at her enclosure because I have like a metal or mesh grill basically, and my plan is to put plexiglass over it because she climbed out because she was able to grab onto a spoke, sort of like climbing a hurricane fence. She was able to get purchase and climb it. So if I put plexiglass at least near the water, I could drill holes in the plexiglass and zip tie it to the existing, you know, infrastructure. That will make it so that it's too slippery to climb out. So that's my plan there. Beyond that, some unique attributes about Squirtle. You'll see the cleft bit here, right? She got like a cleft shell. At least I believe that would be the terminology. Some turtles, they'll have like an extra scoot. Like for some weird genetic mutation, they'll just have one extra scoot. In Squirtle's case, I think we have the right count, unless there's an extra scoot up here and I just don't know how to count. But this scoot definitely has a steep slope on the front of it, whereas this scoot is more of a smooth shape here. So she definitely doesn't have like a symmetrical shape on both sides of her shell. Like this side is definitely steeper, but it seems to protect her. I mean, she's fallen down a flight of wooden stairs, no problem. Also the white stuff between the folds on her neck, that's all. Oh, ow, ow, gotta be careful, they hurt when they scratch you. There you go. Do you like that? Do you like that? She may not like that. Some turtles like it. Anyway, she's starting to get me with the claws, you can see here. And in fact, let's talk about the claws. So these claws here are shorter than a male red-eared slider. And so I assume she's a female red-eared slider because of her claws and of the length of them. A male red-eared slider's claws will usually be considerably thicker. They'll be like, you know, like literally like they'll just be like 4 times longer from what I could figure. Like they are significantly long. And I'm just looking for my OBS window here because I like to get a little preview of what is on my screen. Okay, that'll do. So yeah, anyway, let's see if we get some glamour shots. But yeah, you can see like some, so we got the little wrinkly skin because of course that part of the turtleneck folds up so that she could retract her head. If we look more at the top of the head, you'll see that we have like, you know, a little bit of dry skin up there, right? Dry, crackly skin. It's not cracked, but I'll get into that in a moment. Hey, what's up, Alan Copeland? How are you doing today? My turtle escaped from the tank. And so I figured I'd, show her on stream. And of course, I just remembered I gotta click on a button to make that work. Whoops. I'm trying to get that live chat dialogue thing to work. Poor Squirtle, she has to go and sit down while I do all of this. Sorry, Squirtle, but we have to do this. There we go. That's what I wanted to do. But yeah, thank you for dropping in, Alan Copeland. It's good to see you. And yeah, so what we're doing today is just doing a little quick, tour of my turtle before I put her back in her tank in a little while. Just kind of getting some quality time with Squirtle. And so real quick, yeah, so like definitely going to put some plexiglass on her enclosure so she can't climb out and so she has nothing to bite, because I don't like this uneven wear pattern on her beak, like I want her to, not do that. I'll give her a piece of cuttlefish bone if she needs to grind down her beak, but I don't want her like, biting on metal and, getting that misshapen. Although it might not be a bad thing for eating certain types of creatures. I should ask the turtle forum if this beak pattern, if this wear pattern on her beak is like a bad thing or not. Maybe they'll tell me that, oh, it's perfect or it's a good thing. There we go. Now we got a nice close up. You can see that her nose is part of her beak. And since they're constantly underwater, because they don't breathe underwater, but they can hold their breath for a really long time. She's able to smell underwater, she's able to pick up however smell works underwater. She's able to, use that sense when she's underwater to great effect, which I think turtles actually might go insane if they lose their sense of smell. It might be more severe to them than losing their sense of sight. Because when you're deep in a pond, I mean, you probably don't have much in the way of a sense of sight. But, granted, they're not going to the bottom of the deep blue sea. Anyway, Squirtle, we're almost done, honey. I appreciate your patience. Real quick, this is called the plastron. And the plastron is the belly. And if you ever watch baseball, that thing the umpire wears is also a plastron. And when I first got Squirtle, these segments were not fused together. They were actually almost, that had gaps, almost like a beveled edge that would go down and then back up like a canyon. And there were also little holes or pitted areas on here. Like I think there were literally holes in the middle here. And those holes filled in, the gaps filled in and fused, as you can see here. And so I'm very glad, I'm proud that I was able to get her shell health up to snuff, at least, from what it was beforehand. Although I'd say all in all, she was, a happy enough turtle as it was. I think her previous family, her previous mother in this case, raised her to the bright age of 7 before I adopted Squirtle. So I give kudos to her previous family for, raising her to 7 years of age. I mean, she was a hatchling when she was adopted. Squirtle came from Chinatown. And what happened was, in Chinatown, they'll sell fish either for food or just because, nobody realizes that turtles don't stay small. Sometimes the sales guy will lie to you and tell you if they stay small. Do not listen to those sons of a bitches when they tell you that the turtles stay small. That is not a thing. Like, okay, like unless it's a specific species that for a fact stays small, don't trust the sales guy to tell you that crap. Really. Because like, the sales guy's got an inventory of turtles. He needs to sell those turtles before they outgrow his display stand, And I've been to like a pet store, one of my local pet stores, and I seen like a ginormous red-eared slider in one of the tanks there. And I'm like, I don't know if anybody's gonna come in there and buy this turtle. I felt bad for this poor thing because like this turtle was living in a 20-gallon or maybe a 40-gallon aquarium. This red-eared slider was a bit larger than Squirtle, I believe, maybe about Squirtle size, a little larger. A big freaking red-eared slider. Now, what this red-eared slider had going for it was nice orange ears, because you can see Squirtle does not have her bright orange ears. She has, like, basically, I think she's got more melanin in her head, believe it or not, as, crazy of a term that might sound like, the animals have melanin like us humans, and, you know, basically where you would expect to see her red or orange stripes near her ears, you just see like dark stripes next to the green stripes. Now, a hypermelanistic turtle would be even darker than this. So she's not hypermelanistic like other turtles that I've seen, but she definitely has more melanin in her head. In other areas, I think she has pretty dark features, but, I mean, despite the dark features, we definitely have patches of white and green. It's almost like a shade of light green, basically. That's why I think a lot of times turtles are associated with the color green, because there is some green in here. You know, it's not like, they're not like completely green, as you can see here. There's more black and brown sometimes than there is, you know, green on a turtle. But then we see some green on the chin. I mean, that is a shade of green. Right, Squirtle, huh? Oh, wow, yeah, that's a cool view. Can I show you beak upside down? Now, some people get up in arms saying that turtles can't breathe upside down. It's partially true. It's not nice to keep them upside down, but they're not going to, like, suffocate. Basically, you know, you got the weight of all of their organs below their lungs right now. So if you flip them over, the weight of their organs are pressing down on either their lungs or their diaphragm. I forget exactly which. But in any case, probably the diaphragm. So it's just harder for them to breathe. But you do sometimes have to, you know, it's helpful. I'm not going to do it right now because I don't want her to touch my keyboard. But sometimes you'll put a turtle upside down so that they can flip themselves over. Because if a turtle, you know, is unable to right themselves after being flipped over, that could be a sign of a health condition. But beyond that, don't jump. Beyond that, she's gonna jump. You gotta be. Okay, you want a hand? She's borrowing my hand to climb over. No, you cannot step on my starships. Send the fleet. Da, 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 da. The alien beast is ravaging the planet's surface. Fire the photonic cannon. Da, 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 da. Okay, I'm done. I'm sorry. I'm being corny as F. Okay, I'm done joking around with the starships. But now, jokes aside, so anything else I would want to add? God, someone's going to make a clip out of that, aren't they? This is going to be like one of those embarrassing clips that show up 10 years from now. Like, I'll be like that guy, DSP. I'll just be chilling and someone will make videos about me and they'll be like, oh yeah, that time this guy played with starships and turtles. Da 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 da. Anyway, anything else I want to add? Well, like I said, her claws are like a quarter of the length of what I would expect from a male red-eared slider. Oh. You don't seem to mind that. So, between her claws, between the fact that, well, I've never seen her prove herself to be a male, but she got a tail. It's kind of long. It's not super wide, though. So, male red-eared sliders will usually have very beefy or girthy tails in order to, you know, store their equipment, you know? Whereas female turtles, they just have a little hole at the base of it, which we should be able to see if we go and look for it. Let's see if we can see her cloaca. Sorry, honey. I'm sorry. So, I think the problem is that she's got her tail folded over neatly, which a lot of turtles would do this. They must be doing this for the sake of modesty. They'll curl their tail over to one side. And so, it's almost impossible right now for me to see her cloaca beneath her tail. But on the other side of here, there should be... Oh, sorry. There should be a little cloaca there, and I'm not sure if the cloaca looks radically different on a male red-eared slider, but I'd imagine that the cloaca would at least be, you know, maybe a little wider, bigger hole, something, right? You know, but at the very least, it's got to be a wider tail. So between the fact that her tail seems to be not super wide and the size of her length of her claws, I think she's a female and not male. Pending an x-ray or other medical imaging, I can't be certain, or unless a vet can look at it and eyeball it. Beyond that, we got a little piece of brown stuff on her eye right here that you may barely be able to see. I think it's a piece of wood, but I think it'll come off once she goes swimming, or, you know, rubs herself in a towel or something, because I'm going to put her in a towel in a minute. But on this eye, I want to direct your attention to the brown stuff here, or it's like black stuff on the front. On your right side, you see this black stuff? I think that might be eye gunk. That might be turtle eye gunk. But anyway, that being said, this turtle is the only main difference is that she does not have orange stripes where her ears would be. But she is indeed a red-eared slider. Now, they say they're red-eared sliders, but I mean, like, they look more orange than red, in my opinion. That's what I think. But we're gonna send Squirtle down to the planet now. We're gonna send it to a planet. Oh my god, my YouTube chat pulled this BS again. Yo, you won't believe this, Alan. I can see your chat on my OBS window, but for some reason the YouTube chat window... Oh, there we go. I had to tell it not to filter it. Yeah. Ryan Roger Athley talks about this. Channel suppression. But now, jokes aside, just interesting fact, I guess. I mean, not super interesting, but what happened was I had this over here. You know, like this chat overlay where I can click on the chat and have it appear on the screen. And when I had it set to show top chat, I couldn't see the bottom message. And usually out of reflex, I'll change it to live chat out of the starting gate, but I didn't do it the last 2 times I streamed. So anyway, that's how we get these messages up. But thank you. You know what's funny about this Wrath of Khan shirt? I have a story about this Wrath of Khan shirt, and I might even have a piece of material in my desk as part of the storytelling experience, right? Gotta have a little storytelling aid. Da da da. Here, Squirtle, play Star Trek while I go looking in my desk. Da 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 da. Da, 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 da. I'm sorry, Squirtle. No, you're opening up different apps. Don't press F1. I can't read the chat if you press F1. I'm sorry, honey. But you can't press the F1 key. What were you thinking? What were you thinking, Squirtle? Why are you pressing the F1 key? What are you, some kind of turtle? Like, what makes you think you could press buttons on my keyboard, huh? The audacity of being a turtle. I hope I can find it, because this Star Trek II The Wrath of Khan t-shirt has a story behind it. A sort of story. It's not like really a big story, but... Oh, I found my tweezers! I've been looking for these, though I haven't really been looking, but I need them. Oh cool, I found a missing thumb screw from my computer case. I found a N64 HDMI adapter. I found some soldering wick. I found an IBM, a micro drive, a micro hard drive basically. I found a number of keyboard keys for the IBM Model M keyboard. That's actually good to have. I found various tripod things. Oh, cool. I found a set of X-Acto knives. Well, anyway, I guess I'm just going to have to tell the story if I can't find the item that goes with it. I'm being a bit like Carrot Top, right? You know, Carrot Top does comedy, but he uses a lot of, oh, God, a lot of props. I'm sorry, Squirtle. You can't do that. I mean, you're doing it anyway. All right, I'll put you on the floor. I'll put you on the floor, right? Here. You can go on the floor. I'll come back and get you when I need you, okay? I will. I will come back and get my turtle when I need her. Okay. Yeah, so there is a story behind this shirt. I was really hoping to find the storytelling aid, which is really just a keychain. Well, okay, so here's what happened. I bought this t-shirt while at Retropalooza, which is when I went to Retropalooza in order to attend ValhallaCon. You know, with Loki's Mornings of Mischief and friends. That was the weekend. I met Mexican Iron Man, Loki, Stone Loki. I met, you know, a lot of people that weekend. It was a good time. And in addition to that, I bought some retro kit. Well, you see, I'm walking around Retropalooza, and at one point, I'm trying to fix this camera real quick. At one point, I'm looking down and I see a table with the 8-bit guy sitting down. Yeah, I met the 8-bit guy at Retropalooza, and I was kind of not freaked out. Whoops. Oh, wait, did not mean to cut my head off. But I was definitely like, holy cow, I can't believe I just walked into the 8-bit guy. Like, I look down, I'm like, wow, this is so bizarre. I did not see this coming. But what the heck? I'm sorry, I'm trying to crop and resize something in OBS, and it's not obeying my command. This is like not a first, it's just a minor. So I can resize things, but it's not listening to me when I press the Alt key on my keyboard, and I don't know why the Alt key decides that it doesn't want to work all of a sudden, but it's disrupting my storytelling. So bottom line is I met the 8-bit guy at Retropalooza, and I have a keychain somewhere that he signed. The 8-bit guy signed a Atari ST, I believe, an Atari ST keychain, which looks a lot like a Commodore Amiga, or, you know, like same format as a Commodore 64, where you have the keyboard and computer integrated together. And just a gray keychain of the Atari ST, and he signed the bottom of it. It says, the 8-bit guy, Dave Green. And that was cool. You know, he's a quiet fella, I would say. But granted, I mean, how much small talk can you make at a convention with a stranger? You know, that was a little awkward. I was like, so how's your day going? And he was like, crickets chirping. But once I got on topic, he was fine to talk to. He complimented my t-shirt. That's why 8-bit guys, that's why I have a story about 8-bit guy. He complimented this t-shirt. And then after shaking his hand, I asked him, have you ever seen Star Trek The Next Generation? And he's like, yeah, I just complimented your t-shirt. So I was like, oh yeah, of course you've seen Star Trek. If you're going to compliment my t-shirt, of course you are familiar with Star Trek The Next Generation, right? So that was kind of funny, or a bit of a dim moment for me. But what was, you know, like, why I told him, asked him that question was because after shaking his hand, I was thinking about the time my dad shook Jordy's hand. Yeah, my dad shook Jordy LaForge's hand in an elevator. My dad was going to some training seminar. At the time, he worked for the New York City Department of Sanitation, and he was going to some kind of training thing in some building. And in the elevator, he goes, hey, are you LeVar Burton? And he goes, why, yes, I am. What's your name? And he goes, shakes my hand. He says, oh, well, it's nice to meet you, Mr. M, and shakes my dad's hand. And, yeah, so my dad comes home and he goes, shake my hand. I'm like, all right. This is weird, but all right. I shake my own father's hand. He goes, you just shook Jordy LaForge's hand, or LeVar Burton. And I was like, hell yeah, that's cool. So before my dad washed his hand, after my dad shook Jordy's hand, and before my dad washed his hand, I shook his hand. Therefore, I touched, in a way, I shook Jordy's hand, which is cool. You know, the same man who touched the Enterprise indirectly touched my hand. But other than that, I once went to a different convention, Freedom Fest 2017, and that was the time where I saw William Shatner in person from far away. But I still think it's cool that the photons that bounced off of William Shatner's skin hit my retinas. Good enough for me, man. I don't need to pay $100 to wait online and shake his hand. I mean, sure, getting the autograph would be nice. Sure, having a picture of Shatner would be nice too. But, you know, just knowing that photons bounced off his skin and hit my retinas is pretty cool. To me, I think it's pretty cool. You know, but yeah, unfortunately, this keyboard, it's probably right here in my desk, but I'm not going to dig for it because right now I have a turtle flopping around on the floor, and if I roll my chair around, hell, I'm doing it anyway, but yeah, I gotta be careful. If I roll my chair around, this turtle is gonna be like, you know, crushed. So what do we have in this desk? Well, let's go and do a random goodies here. we're gonna pull random things out of my desk until I find this 8-bit guy autograph, which I feel like it's somewhere else on my desk, but I don't see it. Anyway, so first thing is an N64 HDMI adapter. Now, this is one of the better ones you can actually get on Amazon, in my opinion. This one here is just, you know, N64 to HDMI. The thing I hate about it, well, actually, I don't hate anything about it. I love this one because this one has both the ability to do widescreen and 4:3, 16:9 and 4:3. And that might not seem important, but if you ever get an HDMI adapter for the N64 that does not do widescreen, you'll discover very quickly that it would be nice to have that capability, you know, because like, and let me rephrase that. If you have an N64 adapter that only does widescreen, yes, I have one somewhere. I have an adapter for my N64 that only does widescreen, so it doesn't give you the option to choose between 16:9 and 4:3 like this one does. And generally, almost every N64 game was made to be played in 4:3, which is anti-widescreen. It's not widescreen. But since a lot of these adapters, for some of these adapters, only work in widescreen mode, that means now you're going to be playing a game with a stretched image, right? Your image is going to be stretched horizontally, and some people tolerate it. I don't tolerate that, or I find it difficult to tolerate. I can deal with it sometimes, but I really don't like it. However, there are some N64 games that actually are widescreen, so having a physical switch to go to widescreen mode is nice because there are games that you can actually take advantage of that. In those list is a short list. I think it's like GoldenEye, Perfect Dark, Banjo-Tooie are like among the few games that have, oh, and South Park 64. Now, South Park 64 has pretty much has legit widescreen support, but it also has like a couple of issues in my opinion. Like, for example, I think they did it either to save memory or video resources on the N64. South Park 64 has interlaced video signal. So basically you get combing artifacts. You get these ugly horizontal lines across your screen when you're playing that game on a high-def TV in widescreen. But at least you do get proper widescreen imagery. The next random thing I'm pulling out of my desk is this IBM micro drive. It's basically a hard drive that is like the size of a quarter. This one was probably like a 4 gig from an iPod mini. But these came out pretty early on. I think they were anywhere from like 200 megs to like 2 gigs to 6 gigs, and I think they went up to like 8 gigs. I think they stopped at around 8 gigs. But it's still pretty cool. I remember the first time I was having an argument with a guy at Geek Squad. I was like telling him about this, and he was like, bullshit. He was like, there's no way that they're putting hard drives in something that tiny. And I was like, oh yeah? And I ripped it open and I showed him. Yeah, I found it. So anyway, earlier I mentioned my Star Trek II The Wrath of Khan t-shirt, or Alan Copeland kindly complimented my Wrath of Khan t-shirt, and I said there was a story attached to this, and there is. So yeah, I met the 8-bit guy, shook his hand, told him the story about the time I met Geordie LaForge after asking him if he's ever seen Star Trek The Next Generation, even though he already complimented my Wrath of Khan shirt. And I bought a Commodore 64 USB flash drive, which is currently next to my server because that's the last time I used it as an actual flash drive. And basically that one's a Commodore 64 with a removable bit that has a USB on it. But this here, on the other hand, is one of the venerated, in my opinion, venerated Atari ST home computers. And this is during a very unique era. Well, I find this to be one of the more vibrant eras of computing. Even though today we have vibrant graphics and whatnot, you know, now it's like there's definitely some loss of originality. I mean, everything is freaking either laptops or glass cases with LEDs and liquid cooling. And that's cool. Look, if you like liquid cooling, power to you. You know, some people do beautiful work with liquid cooling. See, YouTube is doing it again. I see a message from there. We go, okay, there was a little delay there. Hey, Stephen Ransom, how are you doing today, buddy? It's good to see you. I was just telling a story about the time I met the 8-bit guy at Retropalooza. And you know, I was wearing this Star Trek shirt, my, you know, Wrath of Khan shirt, and the 8-bit guy complimented it. Then a couple of minutes later, I go, "Have you ever heard of, or have you ever seen Star Trek: The Next Generation?" He goes, "Oh yeah, He goes, "Yeah, I seen Star Trek: Next Generation." He goes, "Yeah, I just complimented your Wrath of Khan shirt," and he said it in a polite way, but it was funny. And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I guess you must have seen Star Trek: The Next Generation if you know, you recognize my shirt." But anyway, around that time, I shook his hand, got an autograph of on this beautifully. I like this keychain a lot too, by the way. Like, I chose this keychain because it was novel. You know, I never had a Commodore 64 until recently, so you know, I don't have any real like member berries in that area whatsoever. But I can respect it, you know. Like, I have more respect. I mean, Commodore Amigas. But anyway, bottom line is there's 8-bit guy's autograph. David Murray, the 8-bit guy. He was a little worried there wouldn't be enough room to sign, but he did a great job at signing this. I mean, he put it in a little square. He even included his handle, which is a nice touch. But he could have just given me his regular autograph and left me without the 8-bit guy. Or he could have wrote 8-bit guy without his real name. It didn't even occur to me that he would sign his real name on here, to be honest. But anyway, these Atari computers were really unique. And I don't know if this is one of them, but what made Atari computers really cool, and you know, in any form factor, even a regular desktop form factor, is the operating systems. One of the operating system lines was Atari TOS, which I don't know if that acronym ever got, or abbreviation, acronym, whatever, ever got like sorted out. Like, does it mean the operating system? Does it mean Trammell operating system in, you know, honor of Jack Trammell? I don't know, but what I do know is that there were some versions of the Atari ST line of computers where you had like the operating system residing on ROM chips. Leave it to a video game company that makes games on cartridges to put the operating system on the motherboard on a ROM chip. In fact, on a series of like 6 ROM chips in some cases. And one of the things that were really innovative about, you know, Atari TOS was when they incorporated the graphical environment manager. And really, to talk about the graphic environment manager, if that's the correct name, we do have to talk a little bit about Digital Research Inc. But basically the short is that this predates Windows 3.1. And look at that, it's doing it to me again. It's doing it to me again. The chat is out to get me. I gotta look into this. I don't know why my chat doesn't update like in a timely manner. Like, I have to trick it into updating and then it updates. Very bizarre. Okay, so anyway, these Atari line of computers, like the Atari ST, they all had like a unique, unique thing about them, unlike IBM PCs of that era. And basically that unique thing, partially, was the operating system environment. So, you know, we got some Wikipedia articles, we got some imagery, we got a fandom wiki page, we got this lady on Toasty Tech. I think it's a lady, might be a guy. But you can tell right off the bat, this does look a lot like Windows 3.1. I mean, anybody who's had Windows 3.1 should remember, you know, something like this. And it doesn't look quite like Windows 3.1, and I'll confirm that right now, or I'll show you what I mean. But if we take any screenshot, you see it's a little more mature, right? You know, you got the minus sign. This is a picture taken on a higher resolution screen. This is a lower res screen, because back then we were using low resolution screens, and so your desktop would get pretty crowded like we're seeing here. You know, that's a pretty crowded desktop right there, because that was the screen resolution you had to deal with. Whereas in contrast, Atari GEM, or Digital Research Inc.'s GEM graphic environment manager, especially earlier versions, look a bit more like Apple. And interestingly, there was a big lawsuit between Apple and Digital Research Incorporated, where Apple was sued because of the recycling bin, or the trash bin, basically. And it's kind of lame, because it's like, you know, they didn't hold that against every company who eventually put a trash bin on their operating system, but at the time they were able to sue in order to get that button, that functionality removed, or at least to have the icon removed. Trying to find a clean picture here. But there we go. I mean, I'd say that's a pretty close, I mean, resemblance, like minus the color, I guess. I mean, you know, you got windows, you can drag them around, you can maximize them, you can close them, you can open up icons, you got the desktop metaphor. You know, both of these have a desktop metaphor situation going on. They got .app extensions, apparently, a bunch of these preloaded apps. Now, do they have late versions that have more color? Maybe. I mean, that's a high contrast image if I've ever seen one, and it's not even listed here. Yeah, like, you know, I mean, that would be relevant because you can see, but bottom line, what I find really interesting about Gem is that it existed on this early as IBM PC as an example. And the reason that's relevant to me is because of the fact that Windows 1.1, like, let's see, okay, so what version of Gem is this? This is actually where the magic is going to be coming up. Wow, man, I love these. I guess there's... Honestly, I just wanted a simple... Okay, Gem 1.0. Beautiful. 1.1. That is 1.1. That is Gem version 2. This is Gem version 3. This is something called ViewMax for DR-DOS, which would have been like a spin-off under Novell Netware Company later on, which looks a bit schlocky at this point, I'll admit, you know, color-wise. But the important thing is that Gem version 3 shipped in 1988. Windows 3.1 debuted in 1992. Okay, so this is basically something that Digital Research and Atari, I don't know why these images are coming up blurry right now, but whatever, I'm not going to fight with it. But bottom line is that this UI, this aesthetic, whatever you want to call it, definitely predated Windows 3.1. Now, let's talk about what Windows looked like, you know, when it was new. The first version of Windows was 1.1, but I don't think it definitely is not what I would call an operating system. It's definitely not an operating system. It's more like an app. 1985. Okay, that predates Digital Research Gem from 1988. And is that when actually that's when actually this version of Gem is 1985. So this is perfect. Okay. Good. I have perfect examples here. November 1985, and this is Digital Research Gem from April 1985. So what did Windows 1.1 look like back then? Number one, I don't know what this logo is, but I've never seen it before. Actually, I do remember it now. But let's do Windows 1.1. Whoops. Windows, well, I guess it'd be Windows 1.0 or 1.1. I forget what it was, but let's get a good picture of it because I think this image is pretty dishonest. Okay, I mean, I don't know. I think I mean, it looks like shit. You can tell it's on a low resolution screen, but I still don't think this underscores how shitty of a thing that Windows 1.0 was. Like, it wasn't like anything like, I mean, I guess if you open up every useful app at the same time and put it on one screen, it would look like this. But out of these useful apps, we got freaking Reversey, we got a clock, which is not useful. Analog clock is not useful. I mean, I guess it could be, but do you really need that much screen real estate on a computer to see a clock back then? This thing up here is a writing program that apparently has some basic graphics. And you have a file manager, which is like cute, but it's like this file manager isn't very useful unless it's taking up a little more space on the screen. But okay, fine. Here it is. And you got something that resembles a taskbar, actually. So that's kind of forward thinking and cool. So I'm guessing that this taskbar represents apps that are minimized. Yeah. So apps that are open don't get an icon on the bottom. But you can see that Paint is open, it's just minimized. And I remember this is how it used to work in Windows 3.1, at least. This is Windows 1.0, but in Windows 3.1, you'd have this app called the Program Manager. And essentially that would be like, you know, you open up Windows 3.1, you'd get your desktop, and if I can find a picture of one, you get a desktop with a desktop background, and then the first app that would load up when you see a desktop background would be Program Manager. And Program Manager was just this thing up here. But no, I don't want you. So you get the gray background plus the program manager, and then whenever you open up an icon inside program manager, it would be like a folder. So you'd have something called main, you'd have something called games, and they would all be contained inside of program manager's window itself. You can have any color you want in the background. So if you have a 16 color palette, you can choose between a plethora of vivid colors for the background. You can have background wallpapers. You could do them as long as they are bitmaps. So Windows 3.1 was a bit more functional, but the weird thing about Windows 3.1 is when you open up an app, like a game, or if you went and you open up, you go to accessories or apps, you would open up MS Paint. When you minimize Paint, there's no taskbar for the icon to go to. Like I have a taskbar on the bottom of my screen where I can minimize things. You don't have that in Windows 3.1. So when you minimize an app, it turns into a desktop icon. So basically, the desktop in Windows 3.1 does not have icons, except actually, the Windows 3.1 desktop has one icon, and that's for Program Manager. If you close Program Manager, there will always be an icon for Program Manager on your desktop, or if you minimize it. But no of the icons appear on the Windows 3.1 desktop unless you minimize them. So essentially, the desktop in Windows 3.1 serves the same job as the taskbar that we have today. Whereas shortcuts to apps would continue to reside inside Program Manager typically. I think you might be able to put shortcuts on a desktop. Don't quote me on that. And of course, you could use your file manager to put things wherever you choose. Now, this is 1992, but Digital Research Graphic Environment Manager existed in 1985, looking pretty usable. Like right there. Like, it may not look like much, but that looks pretty much as useful as Windows 3.1, or close to as useful as 3.1. And it certainly looks more useful than MS Windows 1.01. And frankly, this picture, like, all we have is a file manager, a writing program, and a couple of junk apps. But getting back to DRI Gem, well, what do we have in this picture? You have to be fair. We have a file manager. Although I like this file manager. It's a bit streamlined. It's not to say I don't like the Windows file manager here. I do like how in Windows 1.0 to 3.1 and 3.11 they had these, like, you know, drive letters up here. That's kind of like a nice little touch. But I don't know. I think that the people at DRI had their eye on actually making functional software. Whereas Microsoft's goal with Windows 1.0 was to basically just, like, you know, get something out, you know, to compete with Apple and DRI. They needed to compete with the graphical stuff. And, you know, they didn't really push hard to get good features right away, in my opinion. I mean, app compatibility, like, you know, in the Windows 3.1 era, to get a copy of WordPerfect, you could get it for DOS, and you can get a separate version for Windows 3.1. I need some water. Squirtle? Don't worry, Squirtle. I'll bring you downstairs in a little while. I gotta bring my turtle downstairs soon. Excuse me. It's really, really parched. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, I can't really harp on this organ too much, you know, other than saying that bottom line is that Windows 3.1, and I'm still trying to fix my window. By the way, did my keyboard ever snap out of that bullshit? Yeah, I don't get it, man. It's freaking annoying. So normally in OBS, I hold down the Alt key, and I can resize things. I can uncrop things. And right now, OBS is, like, not having it at all. Wait a second. Oh my god. My Alt key is opening up my start menu right now. Why is that happening? Start and Alt keys. Wait, did the... Oh, good. I can still press Alt if I do the Windows logo key. That's all I need to know. I'll fix it later as long as I know if that's what I'd have to fix. So let's give this a shot. We're going to go and resize this camera window. There we go. That's all I wanted to do. See? I want to look a little more professional. Even though now I can't raise my hand and my head gets partially cut off, I can fix that later. I just wanted to fix that background glow, right? You know, as we switch to camera views. And hello, Brandon Looney Tunes fan 2000. I did find that movie in my basement. I confirmed it. It was Looney Tunes. I think it was Looney Tunes, or was it Tiny Toons? Crap, I can't remember now. Pretty sure it was the Looney Tunes Christmas special. It might have been Tiny Toons. Pretty sure it was Looney Tunes. It's on a pink DVD disc. I think it's a DVD disc, or pink and red. So I do have to copy that DVD disc in order to, you know, like play it on my computer and share some clips with you in case there's something that you might want to copy or download. I can put it in my Google Drive and you can use it on your channel if you want. But yeah, I still got to copy that disc. So yeah, my Alt and Start keys have switched function. And apparently it's a feature on a Logitech keyboard. I don't have a Logitech keyboard, but function plus P. Oh, I see how this works. Yeah, I mean, like, that's very bizarre. Unplug and replug the keyboard. Alright, I'll wait till the next time my computer reboots. And Brandon currently has 1,201 subscribers to his YouTube channel. Congratulations, Brandon. Keep up the good work. Keep up your determination in growing your channel and your viewership. So yeah, anyway, bottom line is Windows 3.1 came out in 1992, and it was a pretty useful operating system, or a pretty useful graphical environment. Windows, you know, Windows 1.0, or whatever version it was at the time, that came out in 1985 as well. Oh, actually, let me rephrase it. That came out in 1985 alongside DRI Gem, or a little bit after DRI Gem. If I had to sum it up cohesively, because I am a little all over the place. Bottom line is that Windows 3.1 was a pretty useful operating system. That operating system came out in 1992, and they learned a lot, and they used the lessons they learned in order to build a useful operating system, you know? And unfortunately, here we are. And this is what grew their user base so that they could, you know, get a lot of people on Windows 95. Now, even Windows 95 wasn't exactly an operating system, but it was more operating system than graphical environment, in that I think you had specific apps that were compatible with it. You had drivers that ran inside of Windows now, you know. We had that in Windows 3.1, but anything before Windows 3.1, I would definitely not consider a real operating system. You know, it's very murky. Even Windows 95 and 98, up to Millennium Edition, Windows had to run on top of DOS. So you would have like MS-DOS version 7 installed as part of your Windows 95 and 98 installations. And that's why you could exit Windows and go into the DOS prompt very easily in Windows 95, 98. In Windows ME, Millennium Edition, they did try to hide the DOS thing a bit. They tried a bit to make that harder to get to. Windows 2000 is not the same. Windows 2000 is not the same as Windows Millennium Edition. I know, you know, ME Millennium is, you know, turn of the century, turn of the millennium. But Windows Millennium Edition is essentially Windows 98 dressed up to look like Windows 2000. Because visually, it's got a lot in common with Windows 2000, or in some areas it does. But it's not Windows 2000. Windows 2000 is Windows NT. Basically, it's, for all intents and purposes, Windows NT 5.0. And basically, Windows NT looked a lot like Windows NT 4.0, for example, looked a lot like Windows, you know, 3.1, I would say. Well, actually, I'm sorry, Windows NT 4.0 looked a lot like Windows 95. Windows NT 3, that might be another story, but NT 4.0, I mean, that is a lot like Windows 95 right there, you know, whereas I don't even know if they had an NT 3.0. I think they had an NT 3.1. Yeah, here we are. But around that same time, you also had Windows for Workgroups 3.11. And so Windows for Workgroups 3.11 is also like one of those Windows NT precursor operating systems. I mean, heck, it's actually not that many disks, but it's got a couple more disks, you know, than Windows 3.1. That had 6 disks. This appears to have 8 disks in the last image I saw. But yeah, basically bottom line is Windows NT 3.11, that was for network environments, you know, and when they moved forward from that, you had 2 branches of Windows. You had Windows NT, and you had your consumer Windows, Windows 95, 98, etc. And around the time of Windows Millennium Edition, Windows was very, you know, sketchy and unstable, and, you know, there was just a lot of little issues where a lot of people were happier using Windows 2000 for a time, and that used to be my solution to everybody's computer problems. Like, they had pop-ups, they had spyware, they had adware, and I would just say, you know, you need Windows 2000 and adware, and, you know, probably the latter part is not as important, but at the time, like, even if you installed Windows 2000, it was more stable and smooth running. You would still accidentally get, you know, junk on your computer, and running a scan with adware on a regular basis would help to identify and remove junk before it piled up on you. That would be the general theory. These days, we don't tend to have to run constant spyware scans, and sometimes I wonder if computers are just that much more stable that you don't need to run these spyware scans, or I mean, what I mean is, if computers are so stable now that if you know, you don't notice that your computer's infected. You know, you get like a major malware infection back in 2001, your computer runs slow, you're getting pop-ups, you know something is up. But today, it's like, if you don't get the pop-ups, and your computer's not running slow, how do you know if you have any malware or minor spyware? Usually, we only notice when it actually interferes with the operation of our computer, you know. You get a virus, something like that, you know, things, the internet stops working, the sound stops working, then you suddenly are lugging your computer into the Geek Squad saying, help. But, you know, people don't want to spend $200, at least back then, it was $200 to fix a computer back then for that type of thing, you know, unless something is actually not working. And so you're not going to bring your computer in for service if you have a hunch that there's some spyware, although these days, you know, identity theft, some people are more, you know, concerned than others. Wow, that's an interesting one. I had to click on that. I was like, what is this? Anime Mook Harune Yug. Don't know what it is, but I just, that picture jumped out at me. I think it's a manga. And that's just the ads I was getting too. But, oh, that's a cool Gundam ad, but it's $70, so I'm not going to click on a $70 Gundam at this time. But yeah, I remember AdAware. You install it, you update it, you scan it, sort of like a virus scan, but it would look for things varying from minor to very serious. And then if this picked up something serious, you'd have to run a whole other scan with a different anti-malware utility, because sometimes AdAware couldn't, you know, see everything. You know, it just it's like that's the thing about the whole, like, 2004 to 2005 to 2008 even. You could run a scan with 2 different programs, like Spy Sweeper Search and Destroy, AdAware, and WebRoot Spy Sweeper, and something else, Spybot, whatever it was called. And you would find different things, different infections, and some of them were really minor. Some programs would count every cookie as something potentially concerning, and there's some importance to that, but not necessarily always the case. I mean, there's always going to be some amount of tracking cookies, and you don't necessarily have to painstakingly remove every cookie, although maybe it helps to, like, you know, cover your tracks in the long term. You know, I guess there could be something to be said for that. I had a customer at Best Buy. He came in bragging about how he always runs, you know, scans. He was going like, oh yeah, every week I open up my computer and I dust it. He pulls it out of the, you know, entertainment rack or the desk, cleans it out with a vacuum, and then puts it back. And then he does his spyware scan. He was describing his whole health routine. My friend's like, my goodness, does this man have a life? I mean, is this all you do on your computer, is like run scans? And I remember when I was younger, I thought, you know, like, you'd be playing with computers, building them, repairing them, you know, stuff like that, learning how to cannibalize parts. And you would get the bright idea. You'd be like, hey, let's just install some junk on here. Well, not bright idea, but, you know, you'd have a copy of Norton Utilities. You'd have a copy of some other, you know, program. And you say, what the hell, I'll try it all out, you know. And so when you install Norton Utilities or Norton System Works, you get a suite of things that became useless in the malware era, almost useless. But at the time it was like, you know, it was really bumping, it was really popping, and some of it would be like a simple file manager, which, you know, I mean, like, this is like an early version of Norton Utilities, I think. Ah, good, this is actually perfect. So this is showing like one of the prime era. Clean your registry, defragment your registry, optimize your system, defragment your disks. So essentially, it would have a program called Speed Disk, which was like the Windows Disk Defragmenter. And, you know, you might remember the defragmenter. We still have it. This one here is almost useless, except I could run it on my F drive, because that's still made of hard drives. But they're in RAID. They're not necessarily independent hard drives anymore. You know, these are like each separate hard drives combined together as one big volume. And apparently my computer's been running automatic defrags. It ran one automatically a little while ago. Actually, no, it hasn't. Well, either way, it says it's fine. Now the SSDs, it does something called read trimming. I have to read up on what that is, but it's different, and it won't let you run a actual defrag on an SSD, because if you actually ran a defrag on an SSD, you'd probably wear it out prematurely. That's how I broke an SSD many years ago. Essentially, you write too many times to individual blocks that have a limited amount of writes, and after that, you can't write any more data to the SSD. In other news, where's my camera? Because, you know, I just remembered something. So I have some footage from riding my bike yesterday, but we'll get to that in a minute. So bottom line is, Norton Utilities came in many flavors over the years, but essentially it would have these main utilities. It would have a registry cleaner, it would have a disk defragmenter, and it would have like features like that. And the registry cleaner was interesting because what would happen is that you install a lot of programs even before viruses and spyware were an issue. You install a lot of programs on your computer. You uninstall some programs. Whenever you uninstall a program, something is left behind. And over time, this might cause another program not to work correctly or make it difficult to set up or install an application. Well, in that situation, sometimes you didn't know what to do, and, you know, you didn't want to fight the computer too much, but then you'd say, you know what, I'll just run Norton Utilities. And sometimes you'd run the registry scan, and it would fix whatever was causing the issue. And then you could move on with your life, you know. Real quick, I want to copy this SD card. I just wanted to write down that I'm copying, basically I'm just copying the memory card that I use on my bike camera, so that if I go for a bike ride, my bike I'll have enough memory to record a whole video, unlike yesterday when I ran out of footage. Because what I'd like to do is record enough length in a video that I can, whatchamacallit, you know, just record more length. Record, more length, have my phone camera maybe facing me. Originally I was thinking about synchronized. I have two options. Record video with my camera phone facing me while this is facing forward and combine them in editing, or manually press the buttons to tell this lens to rotate towards and away from me, which would require me to interact with the lens. That could be a little more. Both of these methods are distracting. Neither of these methods involve live streaming. I'm not going to live stream for my bike today, even though at some point I do want to sit down in the coming weeks and basically make my Steam Deck into a streaming machine so that I could stream from my bike, because a phone isn't powerful enough, but I think the Steam Deck, it's a very powerful computer for its size, and I think it would be ideal for, you know, that particular use. And basically what I want is to have two webcams hooked up, one facing forward, one facing back. Excuse me. So anyway, bottom line is, that's why people use Norton Utilities. And so at some point there were things that Norton Utilities didn't do, and you had Norton Antivirus, but for some reason all of the antivirus companies were blindsided by the spyware, or maybe they were in favor of it. I don't know. And there was a period where antivirus programs that were previously household names became woefully inadequate to deal with spyware, viruses, spyware, malware, adware. Mainly the malware, the adware, the spyware. Because a lot of spyware would be advertising that also collected data on you. Or spyware where it would take the cookies from your web browser and send them to another third party altogether. Or generate its own cookies and send them to whoever. But like, they worked through various ways, and the point is that it would be a program that you did not install intentionally, or a program that you installed while installing something else, and maybe you didn't read the print, you didn't click no thanks. You know, usually you go to install Java, they tell you, oh, you need a Java update, like a legitimate Java update for security purposes, and you'd run your Java update, and it would be like, do you want to install the Yahoo toolbar? And it would already have it selecting yes. So basically, if you don't click no, if you don't uncheck that checkbox, you're now going to have the Yahoo toolbar. And all because you wanted to install, because you either wanted to install some junk, or because you were installing a perfectly legitimate update. It happened both times. Like, and obviously installing junk, like if you're downloading Kazaa, you're more likely to get some extra third-party junk. But in the end, what would happen is everyone's web browser would have these little toolbars. I don't know if you people remember browser toolbars, but there was an era, and in fact, this is like sort of like a joke of a meme here. This is like an extreme example, but I would love to find a sane example. For some reason, like people must have made a hobby of showing examples of like excessive toolbars. But I just want to find a normal picture. So we're going to find a normal picture. And here's one right here, which apparently is sending me for a loop. Yo, I'm clicking on the same picture and sending me back to the same stupid article. Bottom line is, you have your address bar at the top. You have your bookmarks bar, which is optional. Then you have these two bars. One here. And I believe no, these are tabs. So in this case, this person only has one third-party toolbar in their browser. In this example, it's a version of Internet Explorer. And you can see it's got like an Alexa toolbar, which is not Amazon, it's a different company. Dogpile, which is a search engine. Ask Jeeves. It has something with some buttons in there. You got Yahoo toolbar. You got Alta Vista, which is a precursor to Google, basically. You got the AOL toolbar. Don't know what Mama toolbar does. You got something to look up words. And I'm sure individually, each and every one of these might seem useful to someone. Like on a whim, you're sitting there going, it says, would you like to get the Fox News toolbar? And you're some guy, you're some boomer, you're like, oh yeah, I like Fox News. And you go and you get the Fox News toolbar. But reality, it's like, I already have a search engine. Why am I going to use their search engine? Do I really need a dedicated toolbar taking up screen real estate so that I can search through Fox's toolbar instead? Maybe this gives you an RSS feed so you can see when Hannity comes up next. I don't know. And in my web search, this was one of the more notoriously, sketchy ones on the list. Like this one, they're all collecting data on you. But some of these are collecting data that you didn't necessarily grant permission to collect on you. Or the reason that malware and spyware was bad was because you would have undesired programs that would be impacting your performance of your computer. Now, a standalone toolbar wouldn't necessarily impact your whole computer, but if you didn't choose to install it consciously and you now have a new toolbar, so something like that is still going to use up some of your resources. Some of these toolbars would use up resources and RAM even when you closed your web browser. Some of these toolbars would install additional software behind the scenes along with the toolbar. And some of these toolbars, you couldn't even hide them. Like you'd right click on it, tell the browser, hide that toolbar. And it wouldn't work, or it would come back the next time you opened it or something like that. Some of these toolbars, you couldn't even uninstall them using proper channels. And so that's the point where like Norton Utilities might prove woefully inadequate. What you might do is physically, manually delete a toolbar. Like go into the files and delete the toolbar manually. And then run a Norton Utilities scan and tell it just to scan the registry. Because if you delete a program without uninstalling it, you're going to get all kinds of error messages, right? And so the reason that you get those error messages is because there's this thing called the Windows Registry, and this is an app called regedit. If you go to the start menu, you type the word regedit in like that, this is the app you get. and it basically has 5 folders or 5 main registry keys. But bottom line is, like, all of these will contain settings. For example, there's actually an entry in here somewhere for the recycling bin. And so, empty recycle bin in verb invocation. Okay, so I don't know what that does, but we'll leave that alone. But what I'm actually looking for is the thing that puts the name of the recycle bin in. And it might be this one here. It literally might be this one here. And if it's not, well, hopefully I don't break anything. But my crap. Okay, it didn't let me write to that registry key, and that's probably a good thing that it didn't. But I remember back in Windows 98, you'd find the registry key for the recycling bin, and you'd rename it to like Ron's crap or something like that. And, you know, it would come up because you couldn't right click on the recycling bin back then and rename it. I think now you can. We could try that. I mean, I don't really care. I don't really use the recycling bin. But, I mean, I do, but you know what I mean. I don't use the icon for the recycling bin. But there is an icon on the desktop. And in fact, I can't even see it because my desktop icon is hidden. You know, I mean, like, I hide all my desktop icons. I don't even know what's on my desktop right now. If I was to go and say, view desktop icons, I don't even know what would come up. A lot of crap. So here's our recycling bin, and yeah, we could rename it now. We could do Ron's crap. But back in Windows 98, you couldn't do that. In Windows 98, if you wanted to rename that, you would have to go to the registry. And other than that, like, the registry will contain things like if a program needs to link to another program. Whoops. Oh my god, I hate that the Windows key and the Alt key got flipped. If a program links to another program, it's going to be in here somewhere. Things like file extensions. Look, like when you have a .mp3 or .avi, that's designated somewhere here. So even though you go to a different app to tell Windows what program should open what type of file, you can also see that we have it right here in the registry. We can see that Windows Media Player 11 has a setting in here. We have this other thing in here which may point to VLC Media Player. If I had to guess, we can even try to search that. We probably won't find anything, but we could just, you know, search. And that does come up a couple of times in there. Yeah, so, I mean, you know, just some example there. You can search for something. If you know what you're looking for, you can certainly search for it. But the idea is that if I delete a program manually, like VLC Media Player, let's say that was bad. It's not bad, but if it was bad, I would search the registry for mentions of VLC. Now, in this case, it's going through these file extensions because a lot of these programs are directly associated with VLC. Then we keep going. There we go, VLC.exe. So let's say I manually deleted VLC, but now I have a, you know, thing that pops up on my startup saying, hey, this program is not working right. Well, I might go to the registry and tell it, delete this registry key. Delete any mention of VLC that, you know, looks like I can safely delete it, which generally there's nothing here to delete. And if I uninstall VLC, it should clean up after itself. But, yeah, you know, without getting into the weeds, I mean, bottom line is this is where Windows stores a lot of settings. But as you can see, it can get pretty messy and complex. And so things can go, you know, get messy. And so that's why we were using these Norton utilities things back in the day, is because this was the only way for, you know, the average person to try to get a handle on that. Now, on a server environment, you're going to have a little bit of a different situation. You're going to have something like where you go and you know, we could do like, go to a directory. We can go to cd.config. So in Linux, if you have apps that are associated with your own user account, it'll be in your home directory. So the RON folder on this server, on this Linux computer, has a folder that's hidden because it's got a dot at the beginning called .config. And if we look inside the .config folder, you'll see I have settings for one of the apps I use, which I don't think I can actually access right now, but let's see if it comes up. I might have to open up a special thingamajig. There we go. I had to open up an application called Xming. So I could actually issue a command, and I'm actually remotely accessing this Linux app from my desktop, from this computer. It's on a different computer. But essentially, this is a program I would use if I wanted to get a visual representation of what's eating up space. And then I can go back to my cd.config. I can go into a different folder. Let's say, okay, there we go. So this would be like my desktop environment settings. I don't really have a lot of settings there because I don't use this computer as a desktop normally. It's a server. There we go. That was like a hidden directory type situation. But sometimes you'll have settings like this in folders, which are a little bit easier to delete sometimes. But what really is cool about Linux is when you find a config file, and they could be in a few different places, but I'm trying to think of a good example right now. Probably more like CD. Actually, yeah, I know what we do. So, okay, that's like a config file. So these are actually lines of text that we can edit. And everything in blue is commented out. So you can remove the little pound sign. And that would actually make that line active. Or, you know, some of them are commented out because, you know, they're comments. They're telling you what you're looking at, describing something. But other commented out items are simply ways of telling it to ignore that setting. So, for example, I have a yes or no option here that probably impacts security. This option here, this thing that says X11 forwarding, yes, is what, whoops, I keep forgetting the keyboard issue, is what enabled me to tunnel an application via the network in here. And this app looks like it's taking its time to load, probably because it doesn't like scanning through 40 terabytes of data. So we'll pick a simpler app. We got Xclock. And Xclock is literally a clock, an analog clock, and we can resize it. It's actually on the edge of my screen right now. One thing I don't like about the analog clock is that it doesn't lock the aspect ratio. You have to do that yourself. But anyway, bottom line, it's a little clock. This is more like a way of just testing that this X forwarding thing works. And regarding X forwarding, I would definitely like to, you know, talk a little bit more about X forwarding there. A while back, I thought X forwarding was the bee's knees. And that's because, you know, it was like using remote desktop or using TeamViewer or using any remote access application, except that you could forward individual applications. So you have a Linux desktop or a Linux server in a room, maybe a headless computer, a computer with no monitor hooked up, but you remotely log into it so that you can store files on it. Well, sometimes you might need to open up an application like maybe like my computer doesn't have a calculator app, so I can type in this command to open up the calculator, and boom, I have the Unix or Linux calculator right here on my screen. I can resize it, and this is all coming from a remote system, but it's a completely usable, you know, application. I've done this with IRC chat. I've done it with a few other things. Obviously, some of these are gimmicks like the clock. The clock is more like just say, does it work? Yes, it works. And then you would close it almost right away. Same thing with X Eyes. This is an app called X Eyes, and it doesn't really have much use. It's more like a cute little gimmick. But you can see as you move your mouse around, these eyes will follow the mouse pointer. Whoops, I keep forgetting the... Yeah, I gotta fix that. My Alt button and my Windows key button have swapped places today. But yeah, anyway, so you can see like, you know, little eyes kind of just do their thing, whatever. Now, a more useful app I might run, if, let me see, Sublime, if that even runs. That's interesting. That did not seem to want to load. Oh, there it is. So this is a text editor. I already have this text editor on this desktop. I can literally open it up right now. I don't know what's on it, so I'm going to switch my screens real quick. Okay, yeah, there it is. So we have a copy of Sublime running on the network. This one here. And you can tell when I resized the window how it acted like little, got that weird pattern. And this one here is installed locally. But they both basically do the same things. You know, the idea of this is that I could type notes in here. And then theoretically, I can then, you know, access the same application and the same text notes from a different computer. Now, what's the downside of using X forwarding? Well, in this current state, when using X forwarding, it immediately loses the app. So whatever app I'm using, let's open up some, you know, Linux preloaded apps. So for example, we got the X clock. These two apps are opened right now, but the problem with the X11 forwarding is the instant that I lose my SSH connection, and SSH is this thing up here where you have the little command line. The instant I close this or it gets disconnected, my app windows disappear too. And you can't just, they don't come back, you know, like you don't magically call them up afterwards. So if I log back in now, sure, I have my session, so I have an application. So normally if you were in the middle of doing something, you would lose it in the terminal, but I have an application called TMUX, Terminal Multiplexer, and it lets you create like virtual consoles, basically, or virtual terminal sessions. And so I have everything I was just doing is still here, except for the windowed app was lost. I could reopen it, you know, and it opens up on the side of my screen here. You know, so I can reopen the app that I was just running. But if I was in the middle of typing something in Sublime and I didn't save my work or it didn't automatically save, I would lose that work. So how do we prevent that? Well, there is a method. There's an application called, wow, my lighting is getting a little dark now, called XPRA. That means X Persistent Remote Access. Interesting. So anyway, XPRA in theory is really cool. In practice, it's very buggy. So basically XPRA, you install it on your server or you install parts of it on your server. In the past, I would actually download something called WinSwitch, which had some cool features. I mistyped that. But the problem with WinSwitch was, like, I didn't like having an extra icon on the bottom right corner of my screen, you know, the system tray icon. I didn't really need an extra icon on my system tray. But what was cool is, before you can install WinSwitch, you still have to follow these instructions. You still have to, you know, depending on what version of Debian Linux you're using, you would follow these instructions, let's say. And then what you would do is you would stop short. You would basically tell it to install XPRA. You would tell it not, you would skip this step. So this step says install WinSwitch, and you would skip that step and you would just go straight here, because essentially what you're doing here is you're downloading the you know, the source list. You're downloading, you know, all of this stuff that you would need ahead of time, some of the prerequisites. You're making preparations that would allow you to meet the prerequisites in order to install XPRA. That coincidentally are also required for WinSwitch. but you don't have to install WinSwitch. You can skip that part. And you're essentially taking advantage of the WinSwitch repository list. You're taking advantage of their repo in order to get a version of XPRA that is configured and works. The alternative would be to download XPRA directly from, you know, whoever makes it, which might be fun to some people. And theoretically works, but in practice, like, you gotta pretty much roll your own. You're going through a little more work. I mean, I haven't revisited this in years, and considering that somebody updated this page 5 hours ago, maybe things are better now. But I remember messing with WinSwitch and just finding that there was a lot of steps that I don't have to go through. When I go through the WinSwitch repository, there are a lot of steps that I no longer have to perform, that I had to perform when setting up, you know, XPRA from scratch. But once you have XPRA installed correctly and running, then you can open up the clock, and you can open up the clock in such a way that it's detachable. What I mean by that is, like, it opens up the clock like we do now, or it opens up the whatever app I'm running. But if, let's say, you lose the connection, the app keeps running. And then next time you reconnect to the SSH, which this is SSH right here, this command interface is called Secure Shell. And real quick, there we go. I just want to clean that up. So anyway, SSH is just like Telnet, except it's encrypted basically. It's a little bit better, of course. You can also use it for transferring files to a secure FTP. And you can use it like we just did. We used the SSH connection to launch apps, to launch windowed apps remotely. But it's not very helpful if, let's say, it's an app that, you know, it's one thing to have a calculator up, but if it's an app like a spreadsheet, something where you don't want to lose data, then it could be inconvenient. If it's an app like a chat room where you have to sign on every time you open up the chat app, that can be annoying too, you know, because then every time you lose the connection, you got to sign back on to the chat app. That would be supremely inconvenient. So what we have here instead, you know, when we use XPRA, damn it, wrong button. When we use XPRA, we can issue a command telling it to disconnect or reconnect to an existing Windows session. But I didn't even get to the important thing. The important thing is that XPRA is super buggy. So whenever I use it, let's say I'm using a chat app and I keep it open for like 4 days and I keep disconnecting and reconnecting to the existing chat, you know, app. It's convenient. I can access it from this computer and I can access it from my laptop. But then, like, after 4 days, I open up that chat app and the window is scrambled. The graphics look like hell. You know, and it's just, that's what was happening. I was always getting some kind of bug if I kept an app open long enough. And the whole point of having a persistent, you know, remote access method is that it should be persistent. And if it, you know, is malfunctioning in the middle of its persistence, then it's not persistent. It's not useful to me. And so now I only use, you know, X forwarding for limited tasks. So if I want to open up a file manager, I can type in the file manager. I can get a visual file manager on the command line. And so although I do most of my file management through the command line, sometimes maybe I need to go and, you know, open it up in a folder. Now you notice I can double click on this icon, but it doesn't actually, oh, there we go. Now it opened. I had to right click on it. And it's actually opening up Sublime remotely over the network. It's opening up a Sublime, you know, text editor. So that's kind of helpful sometimes. Like maybe I'm going through the folders and that's interesting. It did not like me closing that. Unable to write to session file, sublime session.temp. Okay, I don't care. That's interesting. So now it won't even let me close Sublime. That's awesome. So we press Control C. Oh, I can't. Okay, well, I guess I'm going to just do pkill Sublime. There we go. We had to kill it manually. So even that's a little tricky, but you know, maybe I just have a picture in a folder and I want to preview that picture. I want to see like what is in this Manhattan folder from 2010. So I can open up the picture real quick, preview it, and say, okay, you know what? This is something I need to copy or back up somewhere else. So I might say, oh, I could delete this. So it's nice to have that option. But that's about it. Like, unfortunately, I can't make extensive, because I would love to make extensive use of it. I mean, the theory originally was that you would have a big server and you'd have a bunch of tiny little thin client computers, and they would all get their apps through a server like I just did now. And that can work, but it's just, you know, like, if it stops working, if you start depending on it, that's the problem. You get dependent on a cool feature, then it starts acting up on you. That can be really, you know, like a pain. So if I have any suspicion that it's gonna malfunction on me, then I'm gonna just avoid it at this point. At least it's not mission critical. It's not something that is super, it's not worth the time to be spending on getting it to be working properly. In other news, we have the 3D printer chugging along, still printing the large version of the Hyperion. This is going to be even larger than the one we're looking at right now. And in this app, I have the opposite side. So what I did was, I'm currently printing the bottom here, facing up. And then next, I'm going to print this side facing up. And so we're printing from the middle. But the only thing is that I might do differently is I might tell the printer to do without the raft. Because this piece here is a rectangle. The printer shouldn't have a hard time printing a rectangle at all. And so, you know, maybe the raft creates a rougher texture on both sides, which can be nice sometimes, but generally it's not. So we would tell the printer to generate a skirt. And that should be fine. And I think that about concludes this video today. So that's the progress report on this project, at least, right? And I'm pretty happy with the camera situation. I think the camera is in a pretty decent position, working the way I want it to work. More or less in focus. I can almost see the gap between the nozzle and the workpiece. And I mean, I could almost certainly see if something went wrong, I would be able to see that too. So I'm a pretty happy camper of what we're looking at right now. I'm still a little apprehensive about certain things, but I'm going to just play it by ear. And as long as I don't see a blatant malfunction, like right here, it's a little imperfection here, but I can deal with that. Some of these hangy bits, those are fine too. So essentially what's happening is the 3D printer is seeing anything like this window here or this vent, and it's treating it like an overhang. And in a scaled up version of this model, this would be a pretty significant overhang here. Just like this. This curve here is an overhang. Or this little straight edge. And so the printer generated some tree supports to support the bottom of that overhang. And most of this material will snap right off with little effort. Some of it takes a little more work or using a metal tool. But basically, you know, you can get all of that off of there with little or no issue. And I'm so glad I'm updating the there we go. You know, so yeah, you know, we have that. And thank you, Steven, man. So, you know, I didn't design it. The person who designed it did a beautiful job. They made some interesting decisions in the design. I found this on one of the 3D printing, you know, download websites. But one of the weird things about this particular design of ship is how they, you know, most 3D prints can be made solid or hollow. And so usually you'll get a model. It'll have very thin skin unless you tell it to make the skin thicker. And then you would tell it to fill the inside in or to make it partially hollow with like a little pattern. This, on the other hand, the guy designed it to be hollow, which is good because it saves you on material. And they built thick walls, so that's good. So they made it solid while also making it hollow. But the way they designed their walls, you could see these lines here. And usually these lines would be like due to the way I, you know, had it standing up on the printer bed. But this is actually like the spacing here is pretty much what's happening. And you can even see like on the back here. we have a little flexibility here. If I go and I poke inside here, there's 3 lines here. And I think each of these lines might be made up of more than one line. Probably not. But either way, there's 3 lines making up this boundary here. Yeah, it forms a solid enough shape that it's not an issue. This area is pretty solid. But all throughout this model, we do have like this, like, you know, if you look at the cross section here, because this is a broken piece on the left. See, I broke off the little tip with the little notches on there. But you can see we have this here. And it's still pretty solid, but you could press down, like on, like I think on one of these models, I was able to get some flexure here on the skin, but then there's areas where there's features where it doesn't want to flex at all. But you can hear it crackling sometimes if you press on it, and even though you wouldn't normally press down on a model that you don't want to ruin, I'm kind of just... And there's an example, one of the support things that you can just fleck off with sandpaper. But, you know, I mean, there's some flexibility to the skin, which I find a little disconcerting, but overall, I think the person who designed this did a great job. You know, especially just by choosing to make this hollow. Now, this bit here is my own infill, and it kind of got stuck in there, and I haven't really tried to remove it. Because, I mean, honestly, I don't need to remove it. I don't need to remove that piece of material. If it doesn't want to come out, it doesn't need to come out. In other news, next weekend, I'll probably try to set up a V2 persona. I might take Monday off from work. Next week, Sunday off from work, so that I can do a couple of things. See, I can pull the infill out a few layers at a time. But it's still in there. Now, one idea I had was to literally pour resin inside of the models. You know, just to really add rigidity to them. And what's interesting is if we keep the, you know, tree support, this is basically a tree support with minimal infill, and we pour resin in there, I would think that would add some structural integrity to that, you know? But not going to do that right now until I learn more. And right now my priority is getting them printing nicely. And right now, the way I see it, the good news is this is the last large model I did, and this part is becoming solid, and this part is becoming a little bit less troublesome. So I may be able to keep these bits on the next version, on the large version we're printing out. These parts might come out fine. Even these are not beyond rescue, but this one here is going to get replaced with a brass rod. I've removed its counterpart because it fell off already, but I kept this one on because I want to make sure the sizing of the brass rod is accurate. But that's basically that. So anyway, I'm going to go and hit the road now. But I want to thank everyone for watching. I want to thank you, Stephen Ransom, for dropping in. Hope you have a wonderful, remainder of your weekend. My weekend ends tonight. I have work tomorrow. But hope you and everybody else enjoys tonight. If you attend Zach's stream tonight, I hope everyone enjoys the Circle Jerks, or whatever the name of the show is, Circle of Jerks. It's a good show, and I'm always envious. I hate that show. Well, I don't hate it, but the only thing I don't like about Zach's Saturday show is the fact that I have work the following day. That's not his fault at all. But I'm glad they have a good time. I'm glad Zach's and company, they're chilling out. They have a good time. They have pretty good discussion too. Sometimes they bring up shit I like. It's like there was some anime stuff that came up, or some sci-fi stuff, and it's like I interjected briefly, and I was able to interact with the rest of the chat and the panel, but it was like right as I had to leave, I was like, I gotta try. Even if I can't fall asleep, I have to try to fall asleep. And that's what happens during a Zach's stream. But anyway, I'm gonna get ready to, play with my turtle a little bit more. Then I'm gonna I got a turtle here, by the way. Then I'm gonna get ready to go. Oh, cool, teacher the historian? Well, I'll have my turtle say bye. All right, Squirtle, before you go, say bye-bye to Stephen Ransom, who's heading over to T-Shirted Historian, which, of course, once again, my Google is not let me... There we go. So, yeah, say hi to everybody, Squirtle. Hello, how you doing? See, they talk like that. And, yeah, it is a Cotton Council tonight. See, there's another show that I like, but I hate that it's on the day before I go back to work. Yeah, right? Ain't she a big boy? I think she's a she. I'm not really sure. She's got a dudely face, but she's got feminine claws. I've never seen her lay an egg, but I've never seen her whip it out either. So, You know, I don't know either which way what we're dealing with, but I'm pretty sure it's a she. I treat her like daddy's girl. Your daddy's girl. Give me a kiss. All right, she didn't want to kiss me. I'm sorry. All right, I'm going to bring her away with me now. So anyway, with that being said, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas, please leave a comment. And for now, we shall end transmission. Here, you want to hit the button? I better hit the button. All right, ending transmission now.